Mishlei Parakut Bey is going to continue that scene, that the difference between the wicked and the righteous. And what do we know about the wicked, the righteous? Ohev Musar, Ohev Dat, the Soneto Chachot Ba'ar. He who loves discipline, loves knowledge. Now, this doesn't mean getting pashas, but it means when you do something wrong that somebody tells you and you can accept it. He who spurns reproof is a brutish individual. You won't get any better. Tov yafik ratzon me'adonai v'ish mezimot yarshia. A good man earns favor of God. A man of intrigues gets God's condemnation. Excuse me. So, right, if you're good, then God will be happy with you, and if not, God won't be happy with you. It's a simple verse. Lo yikon adam b'resha, v'shor sadikim bal yimot. A man cannot be established in wickedness, but the root of the righteous will not be shaken loose, like the beginning of the book of Tehillim, where Ashrei Ha'ish, where David says, blessed is the man who didn't go with the counsel of the wicked, and he's going to be like a tree with firm roots. But wickedness, it lasts, but it's not firm. It disappears eventually. Unfortunately, sadly, sometimes it takes a long time. Continuing in verse 4, two words that we know at the beginning of the verse, but we'll know it better from the last chapter of Mishlei. Eshet chayil, ateret ba'ala, ukirakav ba'atzmotav mivisha. A capable wife is a crown for her husband. Yes, obviously it's a book. We know it's written. It's the ancient period. But an incompetent one is like rot on his bones. Machshavot tzadikim mishpat tachbulot risha'im mirma. The purpose of the righteous is supposed to be justice. The plans, the schemes of the wicked are deceit. And I think about this in Parshat Vayetze this week, and Yaakov was deceived his father and sort of manipulated a situation with his brother, and now he goes into the house of the real Rama'ai, the real trickster, who is Lavan, who's going to, give back to Yaakov what he did to his father. And so here we see the schemes of the wicked are deceit. The difference, of course, Yaakov and Esau and Lavan is that Yaakov eventually changes. He transforms. He goes from being a person of trickery to not being that type of person. Verse 6, Divrei Rishaim erav dam ufi yesharim yatzileim. The words of the wicked are a deadly ambush. The speech of the upright is yashar. They are yashar, and what saves them. So much of this book, it's always we've seen about the way you speak, about what you say, determining who you are, what you do, and the impact it's going to have on your life. Continue Pasuk Zayin, verse 7, Hafok Rishaim ve'einam uveit tzadikim ya'amod. Overturn the wicked, and they are gone. But the house of the righteous will endure. Much like we've seen again the same thing over again. Lefi sichlo yehulal ish b'na'avei lev yelavuz. A man is commended according to his intelligence, but a mind that is twisted is held up in contempt. Now here, of course, we've said this, that wisdom here is not just intellectual knowledge. It's about moral education and acting correctly, but this is where it starts in the way oftentimes it's described. Tov niklevi evelo mimit kabed b'chaser lachem. Better to have little esteem, right, and have a servant than to put on airs and have no food. Yodea tzadik nefesh behemto. Verse 10, a righteous man knows the needs of his beast, but the compassion of the wicked is cruelty. We do have a commandment, a mitzvah in the Torah of tsar ba'alei chayim, of not causing unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. And I think in the world we live today, sort of, we have, dogs, cats, whatever it is, but we don't live together with animals in the same way that they do in the developing world, or the way that they did, on the farm, and certainly on the ancient world. And to think of how significant and how much part of life for human beings, the time this book was written and for thousands of years, were animals. For us, animals, you want to see an animal, you go to the zoo, you go to the safari, you see somebody walking their dog, clean up the poop, whatever it might be. As far as I know, you guys, we're not farmers here. We're not shepherds. We're not on a dairy farm. But for them, it was a major part of their life. Even if they weren't, they weren't shepherds. The animals were in and out of the house. I remember one time I was in El Salvador on sort of a relief work mission with American Jewish World Service a long time ago. And, the chickens were in and out of the people's houses, and the other animals in and out. They're just, walking in the house, kind of like somebody's dog does. And so here, a righteous man, it's a major part of their life, knowing the needs of his beast, knowing the needs of his animal, taking care of his animal, as opposed to the wicked. The compassion of the wicked is cruelty. That's not who they are. And so it's a verse that's sort of in isolation, but wanted to sort of really talk about it a little bit more, just to think of how a major part of the life of a person in the ancient world was in terms of the way that they treated their animals. Continue verse 11. Oved ad mato yispa lachem umardef rekim chaser lev. He who tills his land will have food in plenty, will have much food. But he who pursues vanities is devoid of sense. We had this in the last chapter, the same thing. If you prepare, if you work, you'll have the food. And if you don't, you don't. Chamad rasha mitzod ra'im v'shoresh tzadikim yitain. The wicked covet the catch of evil men. The root of the righteous yields fruit, right? So if I'm wicked, I want what he has. But if I'm righteous, then I'm going to be able to yield my own fruit. Befesha sifatayim mokesh ra v'yetzei mitzarat tzadik. Sinful speech is a trap for the evil man, but the righteous escapes from trouble. Again, we've seen that a couple of times. The righteous, they will be, their house won't turn over. They'll be established, and they will be saved based upon what they say. We're in verse 14, Pasuk Yudal Mipri, Fi ish yispatov yedei adam yashiv lo. A man gets everything, right, good from the fruit of his speech. One is repaid in kind for his deeds. So here we see two things. The first thing is the words, and the second thing is gemul, the actions that a person does, and those things will bring benefit to the individual, to the righteous individual. Derech evil yashar be'einav v'shomel eitzah chacham. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but the wise man accepts advice, similar to what we had in the beginning of the chapter, where the wise man is willing to hear musar, he's willing to hear criticism, constructive criticism, ways to make him act better. Evil bayom yivada kaso v'chosek halon arum. A fool's anger and vexation is known at once, but a clever man conceals his humiliation. A good poker player. Yafiach emunah yagid tzedek v'eit shikarim mirma. He who testifies faithfully tells the truth, but a false witness is all deceit, is all mirma, deceit and trickery. That same word we had before. Yesh, we're in verse 18. Boteh kemat kirot charev ulashon chachamim marpeh. So when somebody talks bluntly, it's like a sword thrust. It's like dakar is like a stab of the sword. But the speech of the wise is healing. Different way people talk. Is this talking about more the way that people talk as opposed to what they actually say? Many people want to say a nice thing, but the way they blurt it out, so blunt talk here sounds more about the process, how somebody talks, how they converse with other people. But the righteous, the way that they speak, just generally is going to cause healing. Now, maybe if you have somebody who's wicked and somebody who's mean-spirited, even when they say something nice, you're not going to hear it as being nice because all they are is mean all the time. Continue in verse 19. Sfat emet tikon la'ad, biad argia lishon sheker. So truthful speech lives forever. A lying tongue, just for a moment. I wish that was the case. Think of the story, well-known story. If it's true or not, I don't know. The Chafetz Chaim, somebody who spoke lashon hara ill of others, wanted to apologize and took a pillowcase with pillow with feathers in it and opened the pillow, and the feathers flew everywhere. Just like it's impossible to gather all those feathers, so too it's impossible to stop once you've spoken lies, once you've spoken ill of others. But the lying tongue here, it says it's just for a moment, but the truthful speech lives forever. There are Sfarim. There's one of the Ger Hasidic Rebbes, who's known as the Sfat Emet. His works are, that's what he called his works on commentaries on the Torah, commentaries on the Gemara, etc., etc. But here again, the contrast. It's a very much yin yang, good and bad. Mirma belev chorshera liotzei shalom simcha. Deceit is in the minds of those who plot evil. For those who plan good, there is simcha. And we know this, that there's something to that. If you're wicked and you're doing bad things, eventually, most people, not everybody, but people feel bad about it. So if you're doing good, you feel good about it. If you're somewhere in the middle, like most of us, not wicked and not completely wicked, not completely righteous, when you do something good, you feel good about it. Lo yi'uneh latzadik kol aven u'risha'im mal'ura. No harm befalls the righteous, but the wicked have their fill of misfortune. Sadly, verses like that and in other places don't always seem to be true. We discussed that back in in Tehillim, where we quoted the verse "V'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'azav." Right, we never saw a righteous man who God has abandoned. Here too, it just seems right. If you're righteous, everything's going to be fine. If you're wicked, then nothing. It's going to be misfortune. Unfortunately, we know too well that that's not necessarily the way the world works. To'avat Adonai siftei shaker vosei emuna ritzono. Lying speech is an abomination to God. But those who act faithfully, those who act in emunah, that is, they are pleasing God. They're doing God's will. Adam arum kosedat v'leiv ksilim yikra ivelet. A clever man hides what he knows. Doesn't have to tell everybody. But the mind of the dull cry out folly. Reminded of a story of somebody that I know who drove a Dodge, and they said to him, "Henry, I don't understand. Why do you drive a Dodge?" Very, very rich man. And he said, "I don't have to tell everybody how rich I am. They already know. I don't need to show off for anybody. It's not who I have to be. A clever man conceals what he knows. I don't have to show everybody. I don't have to tell everybody. I don't have to prove to everybody how wise, how smart, how wealthy I am. It's fine. That's for everybody else. I'm confident in who I am. I know who I am. I don't have to show off." The dull, they cry out, they scream out, they want to show everybody everything that they have. Yad charutzim timshol uremiyah tiel lamas. The hand of the diligent wields authority. The negligent are held in subjection. Da'aga b'levish yash chena, davar tov yisam chena. When there's anxiety in a man's mind, he needs to squash it and turn it into joy with a good word. Not so simple to do that when you have anxiety, when you have worry. It just makes it sound like it's so easy to transform the sadness and difficulty and anxiety and worry into joy. But at least they're telling us we should try to do it. Yater mereu tzadik v'derech rishayim tat aim. A righteous man gives his friend direction, but the way of the wicked leads others astray. Lo yacharoch rimyat sedo v'hon adam yakar charutz. A negligent man never has game to roast. A diligent man has precious wealth. Borach tzedakah chayim v'derech nitiva al mavet. The road of the righteous leads to life, but by way of its path there is no death. Orech tzedakah, so there is no mavet. So we're here, of course, everybody dies. Death and taxes, and as I like to joke, unfortunately, death, taxes, and anti-Semitism. But this is the point: is that the person dies, but if they were a righteous person, their deeds, what they taught their kids, what they taught their family, what they taught their students, what they taught their nation, lives on. Thousands of years later, we're still reading the words of Shlomo. We read the words of David. We talk about Moshe Rabbeinu. We talk about Avram. We talk about these righteous individuals. And so, did they really die? No, they were ma'aseh fel amav. They were gathered into their people, still here all of these days later. And so, this chapter, again, similar theme to what we've had before: the yin, the yang, the righteous, and the wicked. The righteous are the ones who are established. The righteous are the ones whose roots are going to remain. The righteous house is not going to be overturned. The deceitful tongue is here for a moment and it's gone. But the righteous, in the way that they live, will sustain and will be around forever to the extent that, in a certain sense, they don't really die. Their path, their road, the way that they've gone is a path that doesn't end, that will go on forever.